Once they're married, your share will be generous. I woke up in my future mother-in-law's guest room. Sharon, my fiancé David's mother, was on the phone downstairs. Her voice carried through the thin walls. David doesn't suspect his bride-to-be knows anything. The wedding is in 6 weeks. My heart stopped. My future mother-in-law was talking about me. The house, the accounts, everything. Once she signs those papers, we split it 50-50. She laughed. Cold. Calculated. Trust me, Linda. Elderly women are easy targets. Especially lonely ones with money. Linda? My fiancé's ex-wife? The woman who'd supposedly moved away 2 years ago. I pressed my phone against the door crack. Recording. Poor Marilyn thinks David loves her. She has no idea this marriage is just business. But I did now. And they had no idea what was coming for them. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. Marilyn Price set her coffee mug down on the kitchen table. The mug still said "World's Best Teacher" in faded red letters. She was 67 now. 3 years since the funeral. The townhouse in Naperville felt too quiet some mornings. She opened her pill organizer. 7 small compartments, each one labeled with a day of the week. Tuesday's pills rattled as she picked them up. Blood pressure medicine, vitamin D, the cholesterol tablet that tasted like chalk. She swallowed them with lukewarm coffee and tried not to count the hours until bedtime. The mail slot clicked. Bills dropped onto the hardwood floor. Marilyn walked over slowly. Her knees complained about the October cold. She bent to gather the envelopes. Medicare statements, bank notices, a grocery store flyer promising senior discounts. She carried the mail to her desk. The same wooden desk where she used to grade science tests. Now it held different papers. Social Security forms, insurance documents, the kind of mail that reminded her she was getting older whether she wanted to or not. The phone rang. Marilyn glanced at the caller ID. Tessa. Her daughter called every Tuesday morning like clockwork. "Hi, Mom." Tessa's voice carried that careful brightness. The tone people used when they thought you might break. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine, honey." Marilyn straightened the mail stack. "Just having my coffee." "That's good." A pause. "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you got out more." "Met some people." Marilyn sighed. They'd had this conversation before. Tessa meant well. But her daughter treated loneliness like a problem that could be solved with scheduling. "I go to church," Marilyn said. "I volunteer at the library. I mean really get out there. Date someone." Tessa's voice grew more animated. "There's this senior center in downtown Naperville. They have activities, dances." Marilyn looked out the window. October leaves covered her small lawn. She'd need to rake them soon. The neighbor's dog was barking again. "I'm not ready for that," she said quietly. "It's been 3 years, Mom." Tessa's tone softened. "Dad wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Marilyn touched her wedding ring. She still wore it on her left hand. Sometimes she forgot it was there. Other times it felt like the heaviest thing she owned. "I know, sweetie. I just need more time." After Tessa hung up, Marilyn sat in the kitchen silence. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked steadily. Outside, a car door slammed. Normal sounds. The kind that used to feel like background music when her husband was alive. Now they felt like reminders. She finished her coffee, rinsed the mug, put it in the dishwasher next to yesterday's single plate and fork. Then she got dressed for church. The sweater she chose was navy blue. Conservative but flattering. She brushed her gray hair and applied lipstick carefully. Not because she expected anyone to notice, but because maintaining standards mattered when everything else felt loose. Naperville Community Church sat on a tree-lined street. Marilyn had attended there for 15 years. She knew which pew felt like home. 3rd row from the back, right side. Close enough to hear clearly. Far enough to leave quietly if the sermon ran long. She arrived 10 minutes early. The parking lot was half full. Mostly older cars. A few young families with children who would fidget during the service. Marilyn walked through the glass doors and nodded to the volunteer greeter. "Morning, Mrs. Price." The young man smiled. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Yes, it is." Marilyn signed the attendance book. Her handwriting looked shaky compared to the names above it. She made a mental note to practice writing more often. Inside the sanctuary, organ music played softly. People chatted in hushed tones. Marilyn found her usual seat and opened her bulletin. The morning's hymns were listed in blue ink. How Great Thou Art, Amazing Grace, songs she'd known by heart since childhood. Marilyn, a familiar voice called from the aisle. Carol Whitman approached with quick steps. Carol was roughly Marilyn's age but dressed younger. Bright scarves, bold jewelry, the kind of woman who volunteered for every committee and remembered everyone's birthday. "I'm so glad you're here," Carol said, settling into the pew beside her. "I have someone I want you to meet." Marilyn's stomach tightened. Carol had been trying to set her up with various widowers since spring. Each introduction felt more awkward than the last. "Carol, I appreciate it, but—" "Just coffee," Carol interrupted. "Nothing serious. He's a lovely man. Very polite. You'll like him." Before Marilyn could protest further, Carol waved someone over. A man approached their pew. Medium height, gray hair combed neatly. He wore a navy blazer and carried himself with quiet confidence. "Marilyn, this is Daniel Brooks," Carol said. "Daniel, meet Marilyn Price. She taught science at Jefferson Middle School for 30 years. Daniel extended his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. His eyes were kind. They crinkled slightly when he smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Price," he said. "Carol tells me you were a wonderful teacher." "Thank you." Marilyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Please, call me Marilyn." "Marilyn," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." Daniel took the seat on Marilyn's other side. During the service, he shared his hymnal when she couldn't find the page number. His voice was pleasant when he sang. Not too loud, not showing off, just participating. After the service ended, people lingered in the fellowship hall. Coffee and donuts were served on long tables covered with white paper cloths. Marilyn usually grabbed a cup and left quickly. Today, Carol steered her toward the refreshment area. "Daniel manages accounts for a logistics company," Carol explained. "Downtown Chicago. Very successful." Daniel looked embarrassed by the praise. "I just keep track of numbers," he said. "Nothing too exciting." Marilyn stirred cream into her coffee. "What kind of logistics?" "Transportation mostly. Making sure shipments get where they're supposed to go." Daniel's eyes stayed focused on her face while he talked. Not wandering around the room like some people did. "It's detail work. Probably similar to teaching in some ways." "How so?" "Organization. Patience. Dealing with problems when they come up." Daniel smiled. "Though I bet your students were more interesting than freight containers." Marilyn laughed despite herself. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Carol watched their conversation with obvious satisfaction. She kept finding excuses to touch Marilyn's arm. Adjusting her cardigan. Brushing invisible lint off her shoulder. The gestures felt maternal but somehow possessive. "You should join us for coffee sometime," Daniel said as they prepared to leave. "I know a nice place in downtown Naperville. Quiet. Good for conversation." Marilyn hesitated. Carol jumped in immediately. "That sounds perfect," Carol said. "Marilyn loves coffee. Don't you, Marilyn?" Yes, I do." Marilyn looked at Daniel. "Coffee would be nice. Wednesday afternoon? Around 2 o'clock? That works." Daniel wrote the address on a piece of paper. His handwriting was neat, careful, like someone who took time with details. "I'll pick you up," he offered. "If that's all right." Marilyn nodded. She gave him her address. 1247 Elm Street. The house with the red mailbox and the maple tree that needed trimming. After Daniel left, Carol lingered near Marilyn's car. "He's perfect for you," Carol said. "Stable job, good manners, and he's clearly interested." Marilyn unlocked her car door. "It's just coffee, Carol." "Of course. But you never know where coffee might lead." Carol's smile was bright, too bright, like someone trying to sell something. She glanced toward Marilyn's purse as if she could see through the leather. "You bring your checkbook to church?" Carol asked suddenly. "What?" Marilyn paused with her hand on the car door. "For the offering. Or do you use the envelopes?" "Oh, cash usually." Marilyn felt confused by the question. "Why?" "Just curious. Some people prefer checks. Better record keeping." Carol's laugh sounded forced. "For taxes, you know." Marilyn got into her car without responding. Through the windshield, she watched Carol walk away. Something about the conversation felt off. Like Carol was fishing for information she had no reason to need. At home, Marilyn heated leftover soup for lunch. Tomato basil from a can. She ate it with crackers while standing at the kitchen counter. Outside, leaves fell steadily from the oak tree in her backyard. She'd need to call the yard service soon. She thought about Daniel, his kind eyes, the way he'd listened when she talked. It had been a long time since a man paid attention to her words instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. But Carol's questions nagged at her. The way she'd looked at Marilyn's purse. The comment about checkbooks. Maybe Marilyn was being paranoid. Carol had brought casseroles after the funeral. She'd called to check on her during the first terrible winter. Why would she have ulterior motives now? Marilyn washed her soup bowl and spoon. She dried them carefully and put them away in the cabinet. Then she walked to her desk and looked at the morning's mail. The Medicare statement was on top. It showed her monthly premium and recent claims. Nothing unusual, but seeing her personal information printed on official paper made her feel exposed somehow. She opened the bank statement next. Her checking account balance was healthy. Social Security and her pension deposited automatically each month. She'd been careful with money since her husband died. No unnecessary expenses, no financial surprises. Marilyn folded the bank statement and put it back in its envelope. She locked the envelope in the desk drawer where she kept important papers. The key lived in a small ceramic bowl on top of the desk, hidden in plain sight among paper clips and rubber bands. That evening, she called Tessa. "I met someone at church today," Marilyn said. "Really?" Tessa's voice perked up immediately. "Tell me everything." "His name is Daniel. Carol introduced us. We're having coffee on Wednesday." "Mom, that's wonderful. What's he like?" Marilyn described Daniel's appearance, his job, the way he'd made her laugh. She left out her strange interaction with Carol. No need to create problems where none might exist. "I'm so proud of you," Tessa said. "Dad really would want you to be happy." After hanging up, Marilyn prepared for bed. She brushed her teeth and washed her face. Applied night cream the way she'd done for decades. Routine provided comfort when emotions felt uncertain. In bed, she stared at the ceiling. The house settled around her with familiar creaks and sighs. She thought about Wednesday, about sitting across from Daniel in a coffee shop, about the possibility that loneliness might not be permanent. But Carol's questions echoed in her mind. Why had she asked about checkbooks? Why had she looked at Marilyn's purse that way? The questions felt small and silly, yet they wouldn't go away. Marilyn turned onto her side and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd do laundry, water her houseplants, maybe bake cookies for the church bake sale next weekend. Normal activities, the kind that made life feel manageable. Wednesday would come whether she worried or not. Daniel would pick her up at 2 o'clock. They'd have coffee and conversation. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe something would. Either way, she'd survived worse uncertainties. But as sleep finally came, one thought lingered. Hope could feel a lot like danger when you'd been alone too long. Wednesday morning arrived with gray clouds and the promise of rain. Marilyn woke earlier than usual. Her stomach felt tight. Coffee with Daniel was 6 hours away. She tried to focus on normal tasks. Breakfast, pills, morning news on the small television in her kitchen. The mail truck rumbled down Elm Street at 10:15. Marilyn watched from her living room window as the postal worker approached her red mailbox. He stuffed several envelopes through the slot and drove away. She waited 5 minutes before opening the front door. No particular reason, just a feeling that rushing to collect mail looked desperate. When she finally retrieved the envelopes, her hands felt cold despite the mild October air. 3 pieces of mail, a utility bill, a grocery store circular, and something else, an envelope with the Social Security Administration logo in the corner. Official blue ink, her name and address printed in block letters. Marilyn carried the mail inside. She set the utility bill and circular on the kitchen counter. The Social Security envelope felt heavier somehow. More important, she opened it carefully with a butter knife. The letter was folded twice. She spread it flat on the kitchen table and read it slowly. The heading said, Direct Deposit Information Update. Below that, 2 paragraphs of small print. Dear Ms. Price, we have processed your recent request to update your direct deposit information for your Social Security benefits. Your new banking details have been verified and will take effect with your next scheduled payment. Due to this change, your November payment may be delayed by 5 to 10 business days while our system updates. We apologize for any inconvenience. Marilyn stared at the letter. She read it again, then a third time. The words didn't change, but they didn't make sense either. She hadn't requested any changes to her direct deposit. Her Social Security money went to the same checking account it had used for 3 years. The same account her husband had set up before he died. Why would she change it? Marilyn walked to her desk. She pulled out her most recent bank statement and compared the account number on it to the one in the Social Security letter. They were different, completely different. Her chest tightened. She sat down hard in the desk chair. The letter crinkled in her hands as she gripped it tighter. Someone had changed her banking information. Someone who wasn't her. The phone sat on the desk beside her computer. Marilyn picked up the receiver and dialed the Social Security Administration number printed on the letter. It rang 4 times before connecting to an automated system. Thank you for calling Social Security. Your call is important to us. Current wait time is approximately 37 minutes. Marilyn hung up. 37 minutes of hold music wouldn't help her think clearly. She needed to call Tessa first. Her daughter worked at an accounting firm. She understood financial paperwork better than anyone. Tessa's office phone rang 3 times. Hendricks and Associates. This is Tessa. Honey, it's Mom. I need to ask you something. Hi, Mom. What's wrong? You sound upset. Marilyn explained about the Social Security letter. The changed bank account. The delayed payment notice. She tried to keep her voice calm but heard it shaking anyway. That does sound strange, Tessa said. But honestly, Mom, those government letters are confusing. Remember when Medicare sent you that notice about prescription coverage? You worried for weeks and it turned out to be nothing. This is different. Someone changed my bank account information. Maybe it's a mistake. Computer glitch or something. Tessa's voice carried that patient tone again. The one that made Marilyn feel foolish for worrying. I'm in meetings all afternoon, but I can help you sort it out tomorrow. Okay, I suppose. Don't stress about it, Mom. These things usually work themselves out. After Tessa hung up, Marilyn sat staring at the Social Security letter. Her daughter's confidence should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt dismissive. Like Marilyn's concern was an overreaction rather than a legitimate problem. She folded the letter and put it in her purse. At least she'd have it with her if she decided to stop by the Social Security office later. Though she wasn't sure she had the energy for government bureaucracy today. The utility bill was next. Commonwealth Edison. Her electric usage for September. Nothing unusual there. The amount due was slightly higher than last month, but autumn meant running the furnace more often. The grocery store circular went directly into the recycling bin. Marilyn had no interest in coupons for frozen dinners and diet soda. By 11:30, she'd showered and started getting ready for coffee with Daniel. She chose a burgundy sweater and brown slacks. Comfortable but flattering. The kind of outfit that suggested she'd made an effort without trying too hard. She applied makeup carefully. Foundation to even her skin tone. A touch of blush. Lipstick in a shade called Autumn Rose. Looking in the bathroom mirror, she saw a woman who could pass for 10 years younger in the right light. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Marilyn grabbed her purse and opened the door. Daniel stood on her front step wearing a charcoal gray sweater and dark jeans. He looked relaxed but well-groomed. Like someone who took care with his appearance but didn't obsess over it. Right on time, Marilyn said. Punctuality is a virtue my mother drilled into me, Daniel replied. You look lovely. Thank you. Daniel's car was parked in her driveway. A silver Honda Accord. Clean but not flashy. The kind of practical vehicle a responsible adult would drive. He opened the passenger door for her and waited until she was settled before closing it. The coffee shop was downtown on Washington Street. A small place called The Daily Grind, that Marilyn had passed many times but never entered. Daniel found a parking space directly in front. Inside, the shop was warm and dimly lit. Small tables with mismatched chairs. The scent of roasted beans and cinnamon. A few other customers sat reading newspapers or working on laptops. The atmosphere felt intimate but not oppressive. Daniel ordered a black coffee. Marilyn chose a latte with an extra shot of espresso. They found a table by the window overlooking the street. October afternoon light filtered through the glass. "This is nice," Marilyn said, settling into her chair. "I thought you might like it. Quiet enough for actual conversation." Daniel smiled. "Tell me about your teaching career. Carol mentioned you taught science for 30 years. Marilyn found herself relaxing as she talked. Daniel listened attentively. He asked thoughtful questions about her students and her favorite lessons. He didn't interrupt or try to one-up her stories with his own. "Chemistry was my specialty," she said. "But I loved the basic biology units too. Kids that age are naturally curious about how their bodies work. That must have been rewarding. Seeing them make those connections." It was. Even the students who claimed to hate school would get excited when we did experiments. Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and quickly turned it face down. The movement was subtle but abrupt. Like someone hiding something. "Sorry," he said. "Work call. I should have turned it off." "No problem." But Marilyn noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes after the interruption. Something had shifted in his expression. Not dramatically, but enough to register. They talked for another hour. Daniel shared stories about his logistics work. The challenges of coordinating shipments across multiple time zones. He made it sound more interesting than Marilyn would have expected. "Numbers tell stories," he said. "Patterns reveal problems before they become crises. Like teaching in a way. Spotting which students were struggling before they failed a test." "Exactly." Daniel's enthusiasm seemed genuine. "You develop instincts about these things." When they finished their coffee, Daniel insisted on paying. He left a generous tip and helped Marilyn with her coat. Outside, the late afternoon air carried the smell of burning leaves. "I'd like to see you again," Daniel said as they reached his car. "Maybe dinner next time?" "I'd like that. This weekend? Saturday evening?" Marilyn nodded. "That sounds perfect." The drive back to Elm Street was comfortable. Daniel asked about her neighborhood. How long she'd lived there. Whether she knew her neighbors well. Normal getting-to-know-you questions. Nothing that felt invasive. But when they reached her house, Daniel accepted her invitation to come inside for a few minutes. He used the bathroom and returned to find her in the kitchen, preparing to make tea. "Don't go to any trouble," he said. "It's no trouble. I usually have an afternoon cup anyway." While the water heated, Daniel wandered around the kitchen and living room. He admired her houseplants, commented on family photos displayed on her mantelpiece, asked about the books stacked on her coffee table. "You're well read," he observed, picking up a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. "I have more time for reading now that I'm retired." Daniel set the book down and moved toward her desk. His fingers traced the edge of the wooden surface. Casual, like someone appreciating good craftsmanship. "Beautiful desk," he said. "Antique? My husband bought it at an estate sale. Years ago." He had good taste. Daniel's eyes swept across the desk's surface. Marilyn saw what he was looking at. Her checkbook. The ceramic bowl containing paper clips and the desk key. A small stack of mail she'd been meaning to file. "You still balance your checkbook by hand?" Daniel asked. "Most people use online banking now. Old habits." Marilyn felt suddenly self-conscious about her traditional methods. "I like seeing everything written down." "Nothing wrong with that. Probably more secure than doing everything on a computer." The kettle whistled. Marilyn excused herself to prepare the tea. When she returned with 2 cups on a tray, Daniel was standing by the window looking out at her backyard. "Lovely view," he said, accepting his tea. "Do you maintain the garden yourself?" "Mostly. I hire someone for the heavy work." "Smart. No point risking injury trying to move heavy things at our age." The phrase stung slightly. Our age, as if they were contemporaries dealing with the same limitations. But Daniel was at least 15 years younger than her. His "our age" felt patronizing rather than inclusive. They drank their tea in the living room. Daniel asked more questions. About her financial planning, whether she'd updated her will recently, if she had family nearby to help with important decisions. The questions seemed reasonable on the surface. Natural topics for 2 people considering a relationship. But something about the way he asked them made Marilyn's chest tighten. Like he was gathering information rather than simply making conversation. Each question felt like a probe. Gentle but persistent. "Carol mentioned you own your house outright," Daniel said. "That must be a relief." "No mortgage payments." "Yes. We paid it off a few years before my husband died. Excellent planning. So many people our age are still struggling with debt. There it was again. Our age. As if acknowledging her seniority was a way to connect with her. But it felt calculating instead of genuine. Daniel finished his tea and checked his watch. I should let you get on with your evening, he said, standing. At the front door, he thanked her for the coffee and the tea. He said he was looking forward to dinner on Saturday. He squeezed her hand gently and kissed her cheek. A chaste gesture that felt appropriate for a second meeting. After he left, Marilyn locked the door and returned to the kitchen. She rinsed their teacups and put them in the dishwasher. Normal activities that usually brought comfort. Tonight they felt hollow. She couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's visit had been more than social. The way he'd examined her desk. His questions about her finances. The subtle comments about her age and her supposed vulnerability. Marilyn walked back to her desk and looked at it through Daniel's eyes. Her checkbook was visible. So were several pieces of mail with her full name and address. The ceramic bowl containing her desk key sat in plain sight. Anyone with basic observation skills could assess her living situation and financial habits within minutes. She opened the desk drawer and looked inside. Bank statements, insurance documents, her social security card in a plastic sleeve. Information that could be valuable to someone with the wrong intentions. Marilyn closed the drawer and turned the key. Then she moved the ceramic bowl to a kitchen cabinet. The key went into her jewelry box upstairs. Small precautions that probably meant nothing. But they made her feel slightly more secure. At 6 o'clock, she heated leftover soup for dinner. Chicken noodle this time. She ate it with saltines while watching the evening news. A political scandal in Springfield. A house fire in Aurora. Normal tragedies that felt distant from her small concerns. But when the news ended, Marilyn's thoughts returned to the Social Security letter. She pulled it from her purse and read it again. The language was official but vague. Your recent request implied she'd initiated the change. But she hadn't. Someone else had used her information to redirect her benefits. She dialed the Social Security number again. This time the wait was shorter. Only 12 minutes before a human voice answered. Social Security Administration. This is Marcus. How can I help you? Marilyn explained about the letter. The changed banking information. Her confusion about a request she'd never made. Marcus listened patiently and asked for her Social Security number and birth date to verify her identity. I show a change request submitted online on October 15th, Marcus said after checking her file. The request came with all the correct verification information. Name, Social Security number, mother's maiden name, current address. But I didn't submit any request. I've never even used your website. I understand this is concerning, ma'am. Unfortunately, when a request comes through with proper verification, our system processes it automatically. So someone else used my information? That's possible. We do see cases of identity theft occasionally. What can I do about it? Marcus explained the process for disputing fraudulent changes. Paperwork to fill out. Documentation to provide. Phone calls to make. The bureaucratic maze felt overwhelming before she'd even started navigating it. Can you at least stop the change until this gets sorted out? Marilyn asked. I can place a temporary hold on the new account information. But you'll need to submit a written dispute within 30 days to make it permanent. Fine. Please do that. The hold is in place now. Your November payment will go to your original account as usual. After hanging up, Marilyn felt drained. The conversation had confirmed her fears. Someone had stolen her identity. Someone who knew her personal information intimately enough to fool the Social Security system. She made a list of people who had access to that information. Tessa obviously, but her own daughter wouldn't steal from her. The bank where she'd done business for 15 years. Her doctor's office. The insurance company that handled her Medicare supplement. And Daniel. He'd been in her house today. Near her desk, asking pointed questions about her finances. But that seemed paranoid. They'd only just met. Why would he target her specifically? Marilyn folded the Social Security letter and put it back in her purse. Tomorrow she'd drive to their office and file the written dispute. She'd also call her bank to make sure no unauthorized changes had been made to her checking account. At 9 o'clock, she prepared for bed. The evening routine felt more important than usual. Familiar steps that helped restore a sense of control. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, applied night cream. Changed into her favorite nightgown. The one with small blue flowers that her husband had given her for Christmas years ago. In bed, she thought about her conversation with Daniel. His kindness seemed genuine, but his questions lingered in her mind like echoes. Why did he need to know about her mortgage status? Her will? Her family situation? Were those normal topics for a budding romance, or something else entirely? She thought about Carol too. The way she'd introduced Daniel so eagerly. Her persistent questions about Marilyn's financial habits. The way she'd looked at Marilyn's purse and checkbook with such interest. Maybe she was overthinking everything. Grief could make people suspicious of kindness. Loneliness could make ordinary interactions feel loaded with hidden meaning. Perhaps Daniel's questions were simply the natural curiosity of someone considering a serious relationship with a widow. But the Social Security letter wasn't paranoia. Someone had stolen her information and tried to redirect her benefits. That was a fact. A crime. Whether Daniel was connected to it or not, she needed to stay vigilant. Marilyn turned off her bedside lamp and closed her eyes. Outside, wind rustled the leaves of her maple tree. A car drove slowly down Elm Street. Normal sounds that should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like questions she couldn't answer. Some questions don't sound like threats until you replay them in the dark. Thursday morning brought a phone call from Carol. Marilyn was washing her breakfast dishes when the phone rang. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel before answering. Marilyn, dear, how are you feeling today? I'm fine, Carol. What can I do for you? I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just a small gathering. Marilyn paused. She hadn't spoken to Carol since church on Sunday. The timing felt strange after her coffee date with Daniel and the Social Security problem. That's very thoughtful, but Daniel will be there, Carol interrupted. He mentioned how much he enjoyed coffee with you. I thought this would be a nice way to continue getting to know each other. Oh, Marilyn felt torn between caution and politeness. Will there be other people? Just Daniel and his mother. She's visiting from Michigan. A lovely woman. I think you'd enjoy meeting her. Meeting the mother. That felt significant, like being evaluated for something more serious than casual dating. I don't want to intrude on family time, Marilyn said. Nonsense. Daniel specifically asked me to include you. He's quite taken with you, you know. The flattery made Marilyn's cheeks warm. When was the last time a man had been taken with her? When had she last felt desired rather than tolerated? What time? She heard herself asking. 6:30. I'll make my famous pot roast. Nothing too heavy. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. Oh, and wear something nice. Daniel's mother can be a bit traditional about appearances. After hanging up, Marilyn felt nervous energy in her stomach. Meeting Daniel's mother felt like crossing a threshold. Moving from casual acquaintance to something more serious. Part of her was excited. Another part whispered warnings she couldn't quite identify. She spent Friday afternoon selecting her outfit. The navy dress she'd worn to Tessa's wedding 2 years ago. Conservative but elegant. Pearl earrings that had belonged to her own mother. Comfortable low heels that wouldn't make her stumble if she was nervous. Carol lived in a brick condominium complex on the west side of Naperville. Marilyn had visited once before. A housewarming party 3 years ago. She remembered the layout. Open floor plan, modern kitchen, sliding glass door leading to a small patio. Marilyn arrived at 6:25. She carried a bottle of white wine and a small bouquet of chrysanthemums from the grocery store. Traditional hostess gifts that couldn't be criticized. Carol answered the door wearing a flowing purple blouse and multiple gold chains. Her makeup was heavier than usual. Her smile brighter, like someone performing hospitality rather than feeling it. Marilyn, you look absolutely lovely. Come in, come in. The condominium smelled like roast beef and vanilla candles. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. The dining room table was set with Carol's good china and cloth napkins. Everything looked elegant but somehow staged. Daniel and his mother will be here soon, Carol said, taking Marilyn's coat. Let me get you some wine. The wine was served in crystal glasses. Expensive ones that caught the light from the chandelier above the dining table. Carol poured generously and clinked their glasses together. To new friendships, Carol said. To new friendships, Marilyn echoed. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30. Carol hurried to answer it while Marilyn remained in the living room. She heard voices in the entryway. Daniel's familiar tone and a woman's voice she didn't recognize. Daniel entered first. He wore a navy blazer and gray slacks. Professional but approachable. His smile was warm when he saw Marilyn. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. Behind him came an older woman. Medium height with silver hair styled in a perfect bob. She wore a cream-colored suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being noticed. "Mother, this is Marilyn Price," Daniel said. "Marilyn, my mother, Sharon Brooks." Sharon extended her hand with a firm grip. Her eyes were the same shade of blue as Daniel's but colder. More calculating. "It's so nice to finally meet you, dear," Sharon said. "Daniel has told me wonderful things." "Thank you. He's told me about you too." "All eyes, I'm sure." Sharon's laugh was musical but didn't reach her eyes. "I hope he's been treating you like the lady you are." The comment felt loaded, as if Sharon was assessing Marilyn's worthiness while simultaneously questioning it. Carol bustled around serving hors d'oeuvres. Cheese and crackers, small meatballs on toothpicks, wine refills that came frequently. The conversation was pleasant but surface level. Weather, local restaurants, Daniel's work schedule. When they moved to the dining table, Carol served pot roast with roasted vegetables. The food was excellent, rich and satisfying, but Marilyn found herself eating slowly. Something about the atmosphere made her stomach feel tight. Sharon dominated the conversation. Stories about Daniel's childhood, his successful career, his devotion to family. Every anecdote painted Daniel as exceptional. The perfect son, the ideal partner for the right woman. "Daniel has always been responsible about money," Sharon said. "Even as a boy, he saved his allowance. Never spent foolishly." "That's an admirable quality," Marilyn said. "Especially important for someone his age. Planning for retirement. Thinking about security." Sharon's eyes fixed on Marilyn. "I imagine that's something you understand well." "I've been fortunate. My husband was a good planner." "How wonderful. So you're comfortable financially? No concerns about medical bills or long-term care?" The question felt intrusive, but refusing to answer would seem rude in front of Daniel and Carol. "I'm managing fine," Marilyn said carefully. "Of course you are, dear. A woman of your generation knows the value of savings." After dinner, Carol served coffee and store-bought apple pie. The conversation shifted to more personal topics. Daniel's previous relationships, why he'd never married, his desire to find someone special to share his life. "I was beginning to think he'd never settle down," Sharon said. "But meeting you has changed something in him. He seems more focused." Marilyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. The wine and the warm room made everything feel slightly surreal, like watching herself from outside her own body. After they finished dessert, Sharon reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. She placed it on the table between the coffee cups and dessert plates. "I hope you don't mind, dear, but I brought along some paperwork. Simple documents that might be helpful as you and Daniel grow closer." Marilyn looked at the folder. Then at Daniel. Then at Carol. All three faces wore expectant smiles, like parents waiting for a child to open a carefully chosen gift. "What kind of paperwork?" Marilyn asked. Sharon opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. Official-looking forms with legal terminology and signature lines. "Just some basic planning documents," Sharon explained. "Power of attorney forms, healthcare directives, the kind of thing every responsible adult should have in place." Marilyn's wine glass felt heavy in her hand. She set it down carefully and leaned forward to read the documents. The text was dense with legal language she didn't fully understand. "Why would I need these?" she asked. "Oh, sweet lady," Sharon said, her voice taking on a maternal tone. "At your age, it's important to have someone you trust handle complicated decisions. Financial matters can be so overwhelming." The phrase stung. "Your age," as if being 67 automatically made her incompetent to manage her own affairs. "I handle my finances just fine," Marilyn said. "Of course you do, dear. But what if something happened? An illness? A fall? Wouldn't you want someone you love to be able to help you?" Daniel reached across the table and covered Marilyn's hand with his. "It's just being practical, Marilyn. We care about you. We want to make sure you're protected." Carol nodded vigorously. "It's so smart to think ahead." My aunt waited too long to do her paperwork. When she had her stroke, it was chaos. The family couldn't access her accounts or make decisions for her care. Marilyn looked down at the documents again. The power of attorney form had Daniel's name printed in the agent section. Below that were bank routing numbers and account information. Some of the numbers looked familiar. How did you know my banking information? Marilyn asked. Sharon's smile flickered slightly. Oh, Daniel mentioned you bank locally. We just used the standard routing number for that bank. Of course, you'd update it with your specific account details when you sign. But the account number wasn't generic. It was specific. Too specific. Marilyn stared at the form and felt her chest tighten. I don't feel comfortable signing these tonight, she said. Why not? Carol asked. They're standard forms. Nothing complicated. I'd like to have my lawyer review them first. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on hers. Marilyn, there's no need for lawyers. These are basic documents. Every couple needs them. Couple? The word caught Marilyn off guard. We've had one coffee date. But we're moving in that direction, aren't we? Daniel's voice was patient, reasonable, like someone explaining something obvious to a confused child. Mother came all this way to meet you. We're talking about serious things here. Sharon leaned forward. Dear, I understand you might feel overwhelmed. It's a lot to process. But Daniel really cares about you. He wants to make sure you're secure. I am secure. Of course you are. But paperwork can be confusing at our age. Wouldn't it be easier to let someone younger handle the complicated stuff? There it was again. Our age. But Sharon was only 5 years older than Marilyn. Why was she speaking as if they were both doddering seniors? I don't find paperwork confusing, Marilyn said. Carol jumped in. Oh, Marilyn, none of us do. But there's so much fraud targeting seniors these days. Identity theft. Scams. Having someone you trust on your accounts provides extra protection. Protection from what? From people who might take advantage of you, Sharon said. Criminals look for isolated older women. Women living alone with significant assets. The conversation felt like a trap closing around her. Every objection was met with patient explanations about her vulnerability, her confusion, her need for protection, as if wanting to think about major financial decisions was evidence of incompetence. Marilyn picked up the power of attorney form and read it more carefully. The language granted Daniel sweeping authority over her finances, the right to access her accounts, transfer money, make investments, change beneficiaries. This gives Daniel complete control over my money, she said. Not control, Sharon corrected. Authority to help you manage things when you need assistance. What if I don't need assistance? Daniel's voice took on a slight edge. Marilyn, you're overthinking this. Mother took time from her busy schedule to help us prepare these documents. The least you could do is trust our judgment. The tone shift was subtle but unmistakable. Disappointment, impatience, like a parent whose patience was wearing thin with a stubborn child. Carol moved her chair closer to Marilyn's. Maybe we should explain what each document is, she said, reaching for the papers. As Carol lifted the power of attorney form, Marilyn glimpsed something underneath. Another document with different names at the top. Carol quickly covered it with her hand. What was that? Marilyn asked. What was what, dear? The paper underneath. I saw different names on it. Oh, that's just. Well, these forms come in packages. There might be sample documents included. Carol's laugh sounded forced. Nothing important. But Marilyn had seen enough to recognize a bank signature card. A document used to add authorized signers to existing accounts. The partial name she'd glimpsed looked like Brooks. Her stomach dropped. They weren't just asking for power of attorney. They were planning to add themselves to her actual bank accounts, as joint owners with full access to her money. I need some air, Marilyn said, pushing back from the table. Marilyn, don't be dramatic, Sharon said. Sit down. Let's talk through your concerns like adults. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being careful. Daniel stood as well. You're acting like we're criminals or something. We're trying to help you. By taking control of my bank accounts? Nobody's taking anything, Carol said quickly. These are just precautionary measures. But Marilyn was no longer listening to their explanations. She was remembering the Social Security letter, the changed banking information, the timing of Daniel's appearance in her life. I need to leave, she said. Marilyn, be reasonable. Daniel's voice carried a warning now. Mother came here specifically to meet you. You're embarrassing all of us. I didn't ask her to come. No, but you certainly enjoyed the attention. The dinners, the flowers. Now when it's time to show some commitment, you're backing out. Sharon stood and moved around the table toward Marilyn. Dear, I think you're having a panic attack. That's common in women your age when faced with important decisions. I'm not panicking. I'm thinking clearly for the first time tonight. Are you? Daniel asked. Because from where I'm standing, you look confused. Paranoid. Maybe we should call your daughter. Let her explain why these documents are necessary. The suggestion felt like a threat. As if Daniel might contact Tessa without Marilyn's permission. As if he had that right already. Don't you dare call my daughter. Then sit down and let's work this out like reasonable people. Marilyn looked around the table. At Daniel's cold eyes, Sharon's predatory smile, Carol's fake concern. She saw them clearly for the first time. Not friends offering help, strangers executing a plan. I'm leaving, she said. Marilyn, stop being ridiculous, Carol said. You're acting senile. The word hit like a slap. Senile, as if wanting to protect her own money was evidence of mental decline. Marilyn grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Behind her, she heard Daniel's voice rising. You're making a huge mistake. We won't offer this kind of help again. She didn't answer. She walked to her car with shaking hands and locked the doors immediately. Through Carol's front window, she could see the three of them standing in the living room. Talking rapidly, probably discussing how to salvage their evening. Marilyn started her car and drove home through the dark streets of Naperville. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from anger. At herself for not seeing the trap sooner. At them for setting it so carefully. At home, she sat in her kitchen with the lights off. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, silence pressed against her like a weight. She thought about the documents on Carol's table. The bank signature cards hidden underneath. The way they'd spoken to her like a confused child. Humiliation doesn't just hurt. It rewrites what you think you deserve. But tonight, Marilyn had rewritten the script herself. She'd walked away. She'd chosen dignity over politeness. Tomorrow she would call her bank. Change her account numbers. File a police report. Tonight, she would sit in her own kitchen and feel grateful for the quiet that no longer seemed like loneliness. Marilyn had reached her car when Sharon called out from Carol's front door. Marilyn, wait, please don't drive like this. Marilyn paused with her hand on the car door. Sharon hurried down the walkway wearing Carol's jacket over her cream suit. You're upset. It's dark. These roads can be dangerous at night for someone our age. There it was again. Our age. The phrase that turned concern into condescension. I can drive fine, Marilyn said. Of course you can, dear. But why take risks? Carol has a lovely guest room. Stay the night. We can all talk more calmly in the morning. Through the front window, Marilyn saw Daniel and Carol watching from the living room. Their faces looked serious, like people making important decisions. I'd rather go home, please, for my peace of mind. Sharon's voice carried just enough tremor to suggest genuine worry. I'd never forgive myself if something happened to you driving upset. The manipulation was subtle but effective. Refusing would make Marilyn seem reckless. Ungrateful for Sharon's motherly concern. And part of her was shaking too hard to trust herself behind the wheel. Just for tonight, Marilyn said. Wonderful. Daniel can drive you home first thing in the morning. Back inside, Carol fussed over preparing the guest room. Fresh towels, extra blankets, a glass of water on the nightstand. She offered Marilyn a nightgown and slippers. All the gestures of a thoughtful hostess. I have an extra toothbrush too, Carol said. Still in the package, Daniel and Sharon sat in the living room discussing tomorrow's plans. Their voices carried a relaxed quality now. Like people who'd successfully resolved a crisis. Mother wants to see the botanical gardens, Daniel said when Marilyn returned from the guest room. Maybe you'd like to join us? Maybe. Marilyn felt drained. The evening's confrontation had left her empty. Like a balloon with all the air let out. I'll make breakfast, Carol offered. My famous blueberry pancakes. Everyone spoke as if the dinner argument had never happened. As if Marilyn's objections to their documents were a minor misunderstanding already forgotten. At 10:30, Carol announced she was tired. Sharon kissed Daniel's cheek and retreated to Carol's bedroom. They would share the bed like old friends. Daniel stretched out on the living room sofa with a pillow and blanket. "Sleep well," he called softly as Marilyn headed for the guest room. The room was small but comfortable. A single bed with a floral bedspread. A dresser with doilies under the lamp. Everything clean and welcoming. But Marilyn felt like an intruder. Someone who'd been maneuvered into accepting hospitality she didn't want. She changed into Carol's borrowed nightgown. Brushed her teeth with the spare toothbrush. Washed her face with cold water that made her feel slightly more alert. In the mirror, she looked older than usual. Tired, like someone who'd been through an ordeal. The house settled into quiet. Marilyn lay in the guest bed listening to muffled voices from the master bedroom. Carol and Sharon talking in low tones. She couldn't make out words but heard the rhythm of their conversation. Urgent, conspiratorial. Sleep came in fragments. Marilyn drifted in and out of consciousness. Her dreams mixed reality with anxiety. Daniel signing papers with her name. Sharon counting money. Carol laughing while Marilyn searched for something she'd lost. At 11:18, according to the digital clock on the nightstand, Marilyn woke needing the bathroom. The house was dark except for a small light in the hallway. She opened the guest room door carefully. The floorboards creaked under her bare feet. The bathroom was at the end of the hall. Past the living room where Daniel slept on the sofa. His breathing was deep and regular. He didn't stir when she padded past. Coming back from the bathroom, Marilyn heard a voice from the master bedroom. Sharon talking quietly but distinctly. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Just enough for sound to escape. Marilyn stopped in the hallway. She shouldn't eavesdrop, but something about Sharon's tone made her feet refuse to move. "Just 3 more weeks," Sharon was saying. "Wedding, signature, done. After that, she'll be too embarrassed to fight." Marilyn's stomach clenched. Wedding? She and Daniel had discussed no such thing. Carol's voice responded. "And the Social Security deposit? Perfect. She thinks it's a mistake." The words hit like ice water. They knew about the Social Security fraud. They weren't just planning future theft. They'd already started. "The Medicare stuff is just noise," Sharon continued. "Keeps her busy while Daniel gets her to sign the POA. Once we're on the house documents, we're safe." Marilyn pressed against the hallway wall. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. The screen seemed impossibly bright in the darkness. But she managed to open the voice recorder app and hit the red button. "She almost bolted tonight," Carol said. "That was close. Daniel pushed too hard. I told him to be patient. Old ladies need time to feel secure." But she signed nothing. "We're back to square one." "No, we're not. She's here. In my control. Tomorrow we'll approach it differently. Make her feel guilty for doubting us." Marilyn felt bile rise in her throat. They were discussing her like a mark. A target to be manipulated until she surrendered. What if she refuses again? Carol asked. Then we moved to Plan B. Medical concern. Confusion. Get her daughter involved. Tessa will pressure her to sign if she thinks her mother is declining. The bank accounts are ready? Daniel opened them yesterday. Routing numbers match her statements. Once she signs, we can transfer everything before she knows what happened. Marilyn's knees gave out slightly. She leaned against the wall for support. They had already opened accounts in her name. They were planning to steal everything she owned. "How much are we talking about?" Carol whispered. "House is worth $400,000. Bank accounts total about $200,000. Plus the Social Security and pension income stream. She's worth more than she looks." "And Daniel's share?" 30%. "Same as yours. I take 40 for planning and setup." They were discussing splitting her life savings like a business transaction. Her home, her retirement money, everything her husband had worked to provide for her security. Marilyn's phone trembled in her hands. The recording app showed red bars indicating audio capture. At least she had evidence now. Proof that this wasn't paranoia or confusion. "She'll fight us in court," Carol said. "Old people can be stubborn. Not if we do this right. By the time she realizes what happened, she'll be Mrs. Daniel Brooks. Married women have different legal standings. And if she claims we defrauded her, who will believe a confused old lady over her loving husband?" Marilyn had heard enough. She crept back to the guest room and closed the door silently. Her hands shook so badly she could barely stop the recording. But she managed to save it and email a copy to herself. She sat on the edge of the bed in the darkness. Her borrowed nightgown felt like a costume now. Evidence of how completely she'd been fooled. They'd planned everything. The church introduction, the social security fraud, the romantic dinners, all of it designed to make her trust them enough to sign away her independence. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the contempt in their voices. Old ladies, confused, stubborn, they saw her as a victim rather than a person. Someone whose feelings and dignity were irrelevant to their plans. Marilyn pulled her knees to her chest and sat in the dark. She wanted to cry but felt too empty. Tears would come later. Right now she needed to think. To plan. To figure out how to escape without alerting them to what she'd overheard. At 6:30, her phone alarm vibrated silently. Carol knocked on the guest room door 20 minutes later. "Good morning, dear. How did you sleep?" "Fine, thank you." Marilyn's voice sounded normal, steady, like someone who hadn't spent the night learning she was the target of a conspiracy. "Breakfast is ready. Blueberry pancakes as promised." In the kitchen, Daniel stood at the counter drinking coffee. He wore the same clothes from the night before but looked refreshed. His smile was warm when he saw Marilyn. "Sleep well?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Yes, thank you." The kiss felt like a lie against her skin. She wanted to recoil but forced herself to stand still. To pretend normalcy while her stomach churned. Sharon emerged from the master bedroom fully dressed and made up. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite spending the night in someone else's bed. "Good morning, sweetie," she said, hugging Marilyn tightly. "You look so much better. More rested." The hug lasted too long. Sharon's hands pressed against Marilyn's back like she was checking for something. Or claiming ownership. Carol served pancakes on her good china. Real maple syrup warmed in a small pitcher. Orange juice in crystal glasses. Everything elegant and welcoming. The kind of breakfast that should have made Marilyn feel cherished. Instead, she choked down each bite. The food tasted like cardboard. But she ate steadily and complimented Carol's cooking. Played her role as the grateful guest who'd been rescued from her own foolishness. "We should discuss last night," Daniel said as they finished eating. Marilyn's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about it?" "Your concerns about the documents. Mother and I stayed up talking about better ways to explain things." "That's very thoughtful. We want you to feel secure. Not pressured." Daniel's voice carried infinite patience. Like someone speaking to a beloved but difficult child. "Maybe we could arrange for you to talk with our family attorney. He could explain the benefits of proper planning." "Or your own attorney," Sharon added quickly. "Though of course he'd charge you for the consultation. Our man does family planning as a courtesy." They were closing the net again. Offering choices that weren't really choices. But Marilyn nodded as if considering their suggestions. "I appreciate that," she said. "But I'd like some time to think everything through." "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need." Sharon's smile was indulgent. Though at our age, waiting too long can be risky. Things change so quickly when we get older. There it was again. The subtle reminder of her supposed frailty. Her need for protection they were so generously offering. After breakfast, Daniel drove Marilyn home. The morning was crisp and bright. October sunlight slanted through the car windows. Normal autumn beauty that should have lifted her spirits. "I'm sorry if we overwhelmed you last night," Daniel said as they pulled into her driveway. "You didn't overwhelm me." "Good. Because I care about you, Marilyn. More than I expected to when Carol first introduced us." His voice sounded sincere. If Marilyn hadn't heard his mother and Carol dividing up her assets, she might have believed him. Might have felt flattered by his attention. "I care about you too," she said. It wasn't entirely false. Some part of her had cared about the Daniel she thought she knew. The kind man who'd made her laugh over coffee. But that Daniel had been a performance. A role played to gain her trust. "I'll call you later," he said, walking her to the front door. "Maybe we can have dinner again soon. Just the two of us this time." "I'd like that." Daniel kissed her goodbye. A soft, lingering kiss that made her skin crawl. She stood at her door waving until he drove away. Then she went inside and locked the deadbolt. In her kitchen, Marilyn sat at the table where she'd eaten breakfast alone for 3 years. The silence felt different now. Not lonely. Protective. Like armor against people who would invade her space with false kindness. She pulled out her important papers. Bank statements. Insurance documents. Social Security records, Medicare statements. Everything spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. The routing number on the power of attorney form Daniel had brought matched her bank statements exactly. They'd done their homework, researched her finances thoroughly before approaching her. Marilyn stared at her own address printed on official documents. Her social security number, her account balances, information that should have been private but somehow wasn't. She felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with romance or money. They'd stolen her sense of safety, her ability to trust her own judgment. They'd made her doubt whether kindness was real or calculated, whether she deserved respect or just patient management. Rock bottom wasn't falling, it was realizing someone had pushed you and called it love. But sitting in her own kitchen, surrounded by her own papers, Marilyn felt something besides despair. Anger, clean and sharp and focused. They'd underestimated her, treated her like a confused old woman who would sign away her dignity for the illusion of companionship. Tomorrow she would prove them wrong. Marilyn sat in her kitchen staring at the bank statements spread across the table. The numbers blurred together, not from tears, from exhaustion, from the weight of understanding how completely she'd been fooled. Her pill organizer sat beside her coffee mug. Tuesday's compartment was empty. She'd already taken her morning medications. Blood pressure pills, vitamin D, the cholesterol tablet that always left a chalky taste. Routine anchored her when everything else felt unstable. She pushed the bank statements aside and opened the drawer where she kept older papers. Files from the months after her husband's funeral. Bills she'd struggled to understand. Insurance forms that seemed written in a foreign language. Among the papers was a small notebook her husband had kept, his handwriting in blue ink. Lists of account numbers, phone contacts for their financial advisor, notes about automatic payments and investment schedules. Marilyn opened the notebook and found a page dated 3 months before he died. His handwriting was shaky but determined. The cancer had weakened his hands but not his mind. Important, for Marilyn. Trust your instincts. If someone rushes you, they're not protecting you. Take time. Ask questions. You're smarter than you think. Below that, a list of warning signs he'd copied from a senior fraud prevention pamphlet. Too much interest in your finances. Pressure to sign quickly. Isolation from family and friends. Her husband had known this day might come. Had tried to prepare her for people who would see her vulnerability as opportunity. She'd forgotten his warnings in the loneliness that followed his death. Marilyn closed the notebook and held it against her chest. She could almost hear his voice. Steady, patient, the way he'd explained complex concepts when she felt overwhelmed by practical matters. You taught chemistry for 30 years, he'd say when she worried about balancing their checkbook. You can handle this. But handling household finances was different from protecting herself from sophisticated thieves. Daniel and Sharon had studied her weaknesses, crafted their approach to exploit her specific needs and fears. Marilyn remembered the first month after meeting Daniel. He'd offered to help organize her bills. Sat at this same kitchen table sorting through her mail. She'd felt grateful for his attention, relieved that someone cared enough to assist with tedious paperwork. Now she saw that evening differently. Daniel hadn't been helping. He'd been gathering intelligence, learning her banking habits, memorizing account numbers, assessing the value of what he planned to steal. She remembered Carol's frequent visits during that same period, always arriving when the mail was delivered, always asking if there was anything she could help with, offering to drive Marilyn to the bank or the Social Security office. I love helping friends navigate all this bureaucracy, Carol had said. Bureaucracy. As if managing her own affairs was too complex for someone her age. As if accepting help was more sensible than maintaining independence. Marilyn walked to the window overlooking her backyard. The maple tree her husband had planted 20 years ago dominated the view. Its leaves were brilliant orange and yellow now. Beautiful but temporary. Soon they would fall and leave the branches bare until spring. Change was inevitable. Loss was part of aging. But surrendering to predators wasn't wisdom. It was surrender. She thought about Sharon's voice through the bedroom door. Old ladies need time to feel secure. The clinical detachment in those words. Like discussing livestock rather than human beings. They'd researched her thoroughly, knew she was widowed, financially stable, socially isolated, the perfect target for a romance scam with legal complications. They'd probably done this before. Refined their techniques through practice on other lonely women. Marilyn opened her laptop and searched for elder financial abuse. The results filled her screen. Articles about power of attorney fraud, romance scams targeting widows, stories that sounded exactly like her own experience. One article quoted a police detective, "These criminals are patient. They build relationships over months. By the time victims realize what's happening, they're emotionally invested in their abusers." The word, abuser, hit like a slap. But it was accurate. Daniel had abused her trust. Sharon had abused her hospitality. Carol had abused their friendship. They'd turned her basic human needs against her. Marilyn scrolled through victim testimonials. Women describing shame and isolation. Financial ruin. Family relationships destroyed by mistrust. Some had lost everything. Others had recovered their money but never their confidence. "I stopped trusting my own judgment," one woman wrote. "If I could be fooled so completely, how could I ever feel safe again?" The fear was understandable, but Marilyn refused to let it define her future. She'd been targeted because she was vulnerable, not because she was stupid. The difference mattered. She closed the laptop and returned to her husband's notebook. Flipped through pages of his careful record-keeping. Account numbers written in pencil so they could be erased and updated. Investment summaries organized by date. Everything methodical and clear. On the last page, he'd written advice in red ink. "Remember, you built a good life. Don't let anyone convince you that you can't protect it." Marilyn touched the words with her fingertip. He'd believed in her strength even when cancer was stealing his own. Had trusted her to carry on without him. She wouldn't dishonor that faith by playing the helpless victim. She thought about the recording on her phone. Sharon and Carol's voices detailing their criminal plan. Daniel's share of the proceeds. The timeline for stealing her home and savings. Evidence that could send them to prison. But evidence was useless without action. She needed help from people who understood financial crime. Professionals who wouldn't dismiss her concerns as confusion or paranoia. Marilyn picked up the phone and dialed her bank's main number. The automated system offered multiple options. She pressed 3 for fraud reporting and waited for a human voice. First National Bank Fraud Department. "This is Jennifer. How can I help you? I need to report attempted account theft. People are trying to steal my money using fake power of attorney documents." "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Can you give me your account number so I can pull up your file?" Marilyn provided the information. Jennifer asked detailed questions about the attempted fraud. How she'd discovered it. Who was involved. What documents they'd tried to make her sign. "Have you signed anything yet?" Jennifer asked. "No, but they have my social security number. And they've already filed false claims with Medicare and Social Security." "That's serious. You'll need to contact those agencies directly. But I can protect your bank accounts immediately." Jennifer explained the process. New account numbers. Verbal passwords for phone transactions. Fraud alerts that would flag suspicious activity. Protection that should have been unnecessary but now felt essential. "One more thing," Jennifer said. "Document everything. Keep records of all contact with these people. If this goes to court, you'll need evidence. I have a recording of them discussing their plan." Perfect. That's exactly what prosecutors need. After hanging up, Marilyn felt lighter. Not happy, but purposeful. Like someone who'd stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. She called Social Security next. Then Medicare. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Shock at the scope of the fraud. Immediate protective measures. Advice to contact law enforcement. By noon, Marilyn had changed her banking passwords. Filed fraud reports with 3 government agencies. Documented every interaction in a notebook she labeled evidence. She made a sandwich for lunch. Turkey and cheese on whole wheat bread. Nothing fancy, but eating felt like an act of defiance. She was taking care of herself instead of allowing others to manage her needs. Her phone rang as she finished eating. The caller ID showed Daniel's name. Marilyn stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. He left no voicemail. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. Carol this time. Marilyn let that call go to voicemail too. Then she played the message. "Marilyn, dear, I wanted to check on you. Make sure you got home safely. Daniel mentioned you seemed tired this morning. Call me back when you get this." The concern sounded genuine. If Marilyn hadn't overheard Carol planning to steal her money, she might have felt touched by the attention. Instead, she saved the voicemail as additional evidence. Every contact they made now was an opportunity to document their deception. Marilyn spent the afternoon organizing her finances. She printed new account statements, updated her emergency contact lists, created a file of important phone numbers for quick reference. She also researched elder law attorneys, found 3 with good reviews and experience handling financial abuse cases, made appointments for consultations. Having professional legal advice would strengthen her position when she decided to fight back. Evening came slowly. Marilyn heated soup for dinner. Tomato basil again. She ate it while watching the news. Political scandals, weather reports, normal stories about a world that continued functioning despite her personal crisis. At 8 o'clock, someone knocked on her front door. Marilyn looked through the peephole and saw Daniel standing on her porch. He held a small bouquet of flowers. His expression was concerned but patient. She didn't answer, didn't even move away from the door in case he heard her footsteps. After 5 minutes, he left the flowers on her doorstep and walked back to his car. Marilyn waited until his taillights disappeared before opening the door. The flowers were daisies, simple and cheerful, the kind of gesture that would have melted her heart a week ago. Now they felt like evidence. Proof that Daniel was still playing his role, still pretending to care while planning to rob her. She left the flowers on the porch and locked the door. Tomorrow she would meet with attorneys, file police reports, begin the process of protecting other women from the same deception. Tonight, she would sit in her own kitchen and remember what her husband had written in red ink. She'd built a good life. She wouldn't let anyone convince her that she couldn't protect it. The past didn't just hurt. It finally made sense. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Marilyn woke before her alarm and lay in bed listening to November wind rattle the windows. The daisies Daniel had left on her porch were probably frozen by now. She hadn't brought them inside. She made coffee and opened her laptop at the kitchen table. The attorney appointments she'd scheduled yesterday were confirmed by email. 3 consultations spread over the next week. Professional help that would cost money but provide something more valuable than Daniel's fake assistance. The first appointment was Monday at 10 o'clock. Alicia Grant, elder law attorney. The website showed a woman about Tessa's age with kind eyes and impressive credentials. Harvard Law School, 20 years of experience, specialization in financial abuse cases. Marilyn printed the consultation forms and filled them out carefully. Basic information about her situation. Names of the people involved. Timeline of events. The story looked worse written down. More calculated, more criminal. Her phone rang at 8:15. Tessa calling from her home office. "Hi, Mom. How was your week?" "Eventful." Marilyn hesitated. She hadn't told her daughter about Daniel or the fraud attempts. The shame felt too raw, too complicated to explain over the phone. "Good eventful or bad eventful?" "I'm not sure yet. I'll tell you more when I know more." "That sounds mysterious. Are you dating someone?" The question stung. Tessa's hopeful tone reminded Marilyn how desperately her daughter wanted her to find companionship. How guilty she'd feel if Marilyn's loneliness made her vulnerable to predators. "Something like that," Marilyn said. "Mom, that's wonderful. What's he like?" "We'll see. It's complicated." After hanging up, Marilyn felt the weight of protecting her daughter from this ugliness. Tessa had enough stress managing her own career and family. She didn't need to worry about her mother's poor judgment in men. But keeping secrets felt dangerous too. If Daniel and Sharon escalated their pressure tactics, they might contact Tessa directly. Try to convince her that Marilyn was confused and needed intervention. Marilyn made a note to discuss family communication with the attorney. How to protect loved ones from manipulation while keeping them informed about real threats. At 9 o'clock, she drove to the Naperville Senior Center. Not for activities or socializing. For the fraud prevention resources she'd ignored when they seemed irrelevant to her situation. Now she needed every piece of information she could find. The center occupied a converted school building downtown. Bright hallways lined with bulletin boards advertising classes and support groups. A few early arrivals chatted over coffee in the main lobby. Marilyn found the resource center in what had once been the school library. Shelves of pamphlets about Medicare, Social Security, estate planning, and financial safety. Information she should have studied months ago. She gathered materials about power of attorney abuse, romance scams, and identity theft. The pamphlets were written in simple language with bold warnings and helpful checklists. Tools for people who'd never expected to become crime victims. One brochure caught her attention. Protecting yourself from financial predators. The cover showed an older woman looking confidently at a computer screen. Inside were real stories from fraud survivors. I thought love was supposed to feel safe, one woman wrote. When it felt urgent instead, I should have paid attention. Another victim described the isolation tactics. He convinced me that my family didn't understand our relationship. That they were jealous of my happiness. Marilyn recognized the patterns, the subtle pressure, the manufactured urgency, the way Daniel had made her feel special while simultaneously questioning her competence. She checked out several books and drove home with a bag full of resources. Knowledge that felt like armor against future manipulation. The rest of Saturday was spent organizing evidence. Marilyn created a timeline of events starting with her first meeting with Daniel at church. Every conversation, every red flag she'd ignored, every moment when her instincts had whispered warnings she'd dismissed as paranoia. The timeline was damning, not because she'd been foolish, but because their deception had been so systematic. Carol's introduction at exactly the right moment. Daniel's carefully calibrated charm. Sharon's maternal manipulation, each step designed to lower Marilyn's defenses. She printed emails from government agencies confirming the fraudulent account changes. Saved the recording of Sharon and Carol's conversation in multiple locations. Created a folder labeled Evidence that would travel with her to every meeting and appointment. Sunday meant church. Marilyn almost stayed home. The thought of seeing Carol's fake smile and listening to concerned questions about her confusion felt unbearable. But avoiding church would signal weakness. Give Carol more ammunition for claims about Marilyn's declining mental state. Better to attend and observe. To gather information about other potential victims. Marilyn arrived 10 minutes before service started. She chose a seat near the back instead of her usual pew. A position that offered good sightlines while allowing quick escape if necessary. Carol spotted her immediately, hurried over with exaggerated concern. Marilyn, I was so worried. You didn't return my calls yesterday. I was busy. Marilyn kept her voice pleasant but distant. Organizing some paperwork. Oh, good. I was afraid you were feeling overwhelmed. After Friday night, I mean. Carol's eyes searched Marilyn's face for signs of distress. Confusion. The vulnerability that would justify future intervention. I'm fine, Marilyn said firmly. Of course you are, dear. But if you need anything, you know I'm here. During the service, Marilyn watched Carol interact with other congregation members. How she gravitated toward older women. How she asked personal questions disguised as caring interest. How she collected information about people's families, finances, and social situations. After church, Marilyn approached Pastor Williams in his office. She'd known him for 5 years. A thoughtful man who took his responsibility for congregational welfare seriously. I need to discuss a safety concern, she told him. Pastor Williams closed his office door and offered her a chair. His expression was attentive but cautious. Like someone preparing for difficult news. Marilyn explained about the romance scam. Carol's role as facilitator. The sophisticated nature of their criminal operation. She showed him printouts from the fraud prevention websites about church-based predators. These people use religious communities to find victims, she said. Carol has been introducing single women to Daniel. I may not be the only target. Pastor Williams listened without interruption. His face grew graver as Marilyn detailed the evidence. Have you contacted law enforcement? He asked. I'm meeting with an attorney first. Building a proper case. What do you need from me? Warn the other women. Quietly. Don't create panic, but let people know that Carol may not be trustworthy. Pastor Williams nodded slowly. I'll handle that discreetly. And I'll speak with our church council about reviewing our policies for introducing members to each other. Walking to her car after the meeting, Marilyn felt lighter. Not because the problem was solved, but because she'd stopped carrying it alone. Other people now knew the truth. The conspiracy of silence that protected predators was beginning to crack. Monday morning brought her first attorney consultation. Alicia Grant's office was in a modern building downtown. Professional but warm. The kind of space that suggested competence without intimidation. Alicia was younger than Marilyn had expected. Maybe 45. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Suit that looked expensive but not flashy. Her handshake was firm and her eye contact direct. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Price. I've reviewed the information you provided. This is a clear case of attempted elder financial abuse." Attempted? You didn't sign their documents. They haven't actually stolen money yet. But their actions constitute criminal conspiracy and identity theft. Alicia spread Marilyn's evidence across a conference table. Bank statements, government correspondence, screenshots of the recorded conversation. Everything laid out like pieces of a puzzle. The Social Security fraud was their mistake, Alicia said. It created a paper trail before they secured your cooperation. Most romance scammers wait until after marriage to begin stealing. Marriage? Marilyn's voice cracked slightly. That's clearly their goal. Marriage gives a spouse legal access to assets that would otherwise require elaborate fraud. The words hit like cold water. They hadn't just wanted her money. They'd planned to trap her legally. Make escape nearly impossible even after she discovered the truth. "What are my options?" Marilyn asked. "Several. Civil lawsuit to recover damages. Criminal charges for identity theft and conspiracy. Restraining orders to prevent further contact." "What do you recommend?" "All of the above, but we start with protection. Restraining orders first, then criminal charges. Civil lawsuit last, after they're convicted." Alicia explained the legal process. Gathering evidence, filing motions, court appearances. The timeline would stretch over months. The cost would be significant. But the alternative was allowing criminals to continue targeting vulnerable people. "I'll represent you," Alicia said. "This is exactly the kind of case I went to law school to handle." Marilyn signed a retainer agreement and wrote a check for $5,000. More money than she'd spent on herself in years. But the investment felt empowering. Like hiring professional protection for her dignity and independence. Tuesday was spent at government offices. Social Security first, then Medicare. Each agency required separate visits. Different forms. Multiple conversations with bureaucrats who dealt with fraud daily but still seemed shocked by the sophistication of Marilyn's case. "They opened bank accounts using your information," the Social Security investigator explained. "Routing numbers that would fool our verification system." This wasn't amateur hour. Medicare had similar findings. Fraudulent equipment rentals. Medical services billed to her account. Claims designed to test the system while generating income for the scammers. "How much money are we talking about?" Marilyn asked. "So far? About $8,000 in false claims. But that's just what we've caught." Each revelation made Marilyn angrier. Not the hot rage of immediate betrayal, but the cold fury of calculated violation. They'd used her identity like a credit card. Spent money in her name while pretending to care about her welfare. Wednesday brought a call from her bank's fraud department. Jennifer had found something concerning in Marilyn's account history. "We discovered microtransactions," Jennifer explained. "Tiny withdrawals from 2 months ago. 50 cents. $1. Amounts so small you probably didn't notice." "What does that mean?" "Someone was testing your account. Learning your balance patterns. Preparing for larger withdrawals once they had legal access." Marilyn pulled out her old bank statements and found the transactions. Small amounts she'd dismissed as bank fees or rounding errors. Evidence that Daniel had been probing her financial defenses since their second date. "They've been planning this for months," she told Alicia during their next phone call. "That's actually good news for our case. Premeditation makes the charges more serious." Thursday morning brought a knock on Marilyn's door. She looked through the peephole and saw Daniel standing on her porch. No flowers this time. His expression was serious, almost stern. Marilyn didn't answer. Instead, she called Alicia's office from her kitchen phone. "He's at my house," she whispered. "Don't answer. Don't engage. Document the visit. I'll expedite the restraining order application." Daniel knocked for 10 minutes. Then he walked around the house peering through windows. Checking doors. Behavior that crossed from persistence into stalking. Marilyn photographed him through her bedroom window. Evidence of his escalating desperation. When he finally left, she felt violated but also vindicated. His mask was slipping. The charming suitor was becoming something uglier. Friday afternoon, Alicia called with news. Restraining orders approved. For all three of them. Daniel, Sharon, and Carol. They'll be served Monday morning. What happens then? They'll realize you're fighting back. Things may get complicated before they get better. That evening, Marilyn sat in her kitchen with her evidence folder spread across the table. Bank statements showing unauthorized test withdrawals. Government forms documenting identity theft. Photos of Daniel stalking her property. A recorded confession of criminal conspiracy. 6 months ago, she'd been a lonely widow hoping for companionship. Now she was a crime victim preparing for legal battle. The transformation felt surreal but also empowering. She thought about the other women Daniel and Sharon might target. Elderly widows who wouldn't fight back. Who would sign documents rather than appear ungrateful. Who would surrender their independence to avoid conflict. Those women deserved protection, justice, the knowledge that predators faced consequences for their crimes. Marilyn closed the evidence folder and put it by the door like armor she would wear into battle. Tomorrow she would visit the police station. File criminal charges. Begin the process of holding criminals accountable for their calculated cruelty. Anger didn't ruin her softness. It sharpened her boundaries. And for the first time in months, Marilyn felt like herself again. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Marilyn dressed carefully. Navy blazer over a white blouse. Pearl earrings. The kind of outfit that suggested respectability and competence. Today she would face her accusers in a controlled environment where truth mattered more than manipulation. The restraining orders had been served at 8 o'clock. Daniel at his apartment. Sharon at Carol's condominium. Carol at her front door while neighbors watched from their windows. Legal documents that transformed them from predators into defendants. Alicia had called an hour later. They're panicking. Daniel contacted my office demanding a meeting. Said there were misunderstandings to clear up. What did you tell him? To communicate through his attorney. Which he apparently doesn't have yet. Marilyn met Alicia at the First National Bank branch on Washington Street. The same bank where she'd done business for 15 years. Where tellers knew her name and trusted her judgment. Territory that felt safer than a courtroom or police station. Why here? Marilyn asked as they walked through the glass doors. Because this is where they planned to steal your money. Let them see that their intended crime scene is now their trap. The bank manager, Robert Chen, had cleared his office for the meeting. A formal conference room with windows overlooking the street. Security cameras in every corner. An environment that prioritized documentation over comfort. Officer Patricia Martinez from the Naperville Police had arrived early. A woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a notebook full of prepared questions. She specialized in financial crimes against seniors. Mrs. Price, I want you to know we take these cases seriously, Officer Martinez said. Elder abuse is a felony in Illinois. Your evidence suggests a sophisticated criminal conspiracy. Alicia spread the documentation across the conference table. Bank statements showing unauthorized test withdrawals. Government forms documenting identity theft. Transcripts from the recorded conversation. Evidence that told a story of calculated exploitation. They'll probably claim this was all a misunderstanding, Officer Martinez said. Romance gone wrong. Miscommunication about financial planning. How do we counter that? With facts, numbers, timeline evidence that shows premeditation. At 10:30, Daniel arrived with a woman Marilyn didn't recognize. Middle age, expensive suit, briefcase. Obviously a lawyer hastily retained to manage the crisis. Sharon entered 5 minutes later. Alone. Her silver hair was perfectly styled but her face looked strained. Like someone who'd spent the weekend realizing that elderly victims sometimes fought back. Carol came last. Her usual bright clothing replaced by conservative gray. No jewelry. No scarves. She looked smaller without her performance costume. More ordinary. Less dangerous. Thank you all for coming, Alicia began. We're here to discuss the criminal charges being filed against Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, and Mrs. Whitman. Daniel's attorney leaned forward. My client maintains that any relationship with Mrs. Price was genuine. Any financial discussions were motivated by concern for her welfare. Concern for her welfare? Alicia's voice carried sharp disbelief. Let me read from the recording, Mrs. Price obtained. She played Sharon's voice through a small speaker. Clear audio captured through Carol's bedroom door. Just 3 more weeks. Wedding, signature, done. After that, she'll be too embarrassed to fight. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Daniel's face went pale. Sharon stared at the table. Carol's hands trembled slightly. That recording was obtained illegally, Daniel's attorney protested. Without consent or warrant. Illinois is a one-party consent state, Officer Martinez replied calmly. Mrs. Price had every right to record conversations she was party to. Alicia continued playing the recording. Sharon and Carol discussing Marilyn's financial assets. Planning the division of stolen money. Treating her like livestock to be processed rather than a human being deserving respect. House is worth $400,000. Bank accounts total about $200,000. She's worth more than she looks. Marilyn watched their faces as their own voices convicted them. Daniel's jaw clenched. Sharon's composure cracked. Carol looked like she might be sick. The evidence is overwhelming, Alicia said. Identity theft. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Elder financial abuse. But my client is prepared to consider alternatives to full prosecution. What kind of alternatives? Daniel's attorney asked. Restitution. Public apology. Cooperation with ongoing investigations into other victims. Sharon spoke for the first time. There are no other victims. This was an isolated incident. Officer Martinez opened her own folder. Actually, we've identified 3 other women who've had similar experiences. All church members. All recent widows, all approached by Mr. Brooks through Mrs. Whitman's introductions. Carol's face went ashen. That's not. We never. Mrs. Patterson lost $18,000 before her son intervened. Mrs. Chen signed over power of attorney but died before they could access her accounts. Mrs. Williams is still fighting to regain control of her finances. The room fell silent. Even Daniel's attorney looked stunned by the scope of their criminal enterprise. However, Alicia continued, Mrs. Price is primarily interested in protecting future victims. She's prepared to accept a plea agreement that includes full restitution to all identified victims and cooperation with law enforcement. What are the terms? Daniel's attorney asked. Officer Martinez took over. Guilty pleas to felony conspiracy charges. 5 years probation. Community service focused on elder abuse education. And permanent exclusion from all senior-focused organizations in DuPage County. Sharon leaned forward. And if we refuse? Full prosecution. Prison sentences. Public trial with media coverage. Your faces on the evening news as elder abuse criminals. The threat was effective. All 3 defendants looked at each other with barely concealed panic. Their careful scheme was unraveling in real time. We need time to consider, Daniel's attorney said. You have until 5 o'clock today, Alicia replied. After that, we file charges and let the prosecutor decide your fate. The meeting broke up with minimal conversation. Daniel tried to approach Marilyn as they prepared to leave, but Officer Martinez stepped between them. The restraining order prohibits any contact, she reminded him. Direct or indirect. Daniel's eyes met Marilyn's for a moment. She saw desperation there, fear, the panic of someone whose carefully constructed life was collapsing. But she felt no sympathy. Only relief that his mask had finally fallen completely away. Outside the bank, Alicia and Officer Martinez walked Marilyn to her car. How do you feel? Alicia asked. Tired, but satisfied. Marilyn paused. For the first time in months, I feel like the system is working for me instead of against me. The paperwork protected you instead of erasing you, Officer Martinez said. That's exactly how it should work. At 3:15, Daniel's attorney called Alicia. They would accept the plea agreement. Full cooperation, full restitution, full admission of guilt. It's over, Alicia told Marilyn over the phone. They'll sign the plea agreements tomorrow. You'll receive formal apologies and complete restitution for all costs you incurred. What about the other victims? They'll be made whole too. Mrs. Patterson will get her $18,000 back. Mrs. Williams will regain control of her accounts. That evening, Marilyn sat in her kitchen with the evidence folder closed on the table. The papers inside had served their purpose. Transformed her from victim to victor. given voice to her truth when others tried to silence it with condescension. She thought about the morning's confrontation. How different she'd felt from the confused woman who'd nearly signed away her independence at Carol's dinner table. That woman had been isolated, uncertain, dependent on others' approval. This woman had allies, knowledge, legal protection, the strength that came from refusing to be diminished. Her phone rang. Tessa calling from work. "Mom, are you okay? Someone from a law office called asking about character references for you." "What's going on?" Marilyn took a deep breath. "I'll explain everything when you come for dinner this weekend. But yes, I'm okay. Better than okay. You sound different. Stronger. I feel stronger." After hanging up, Marilyn walked through her house, turning on lights against the November darkness. Each room looked the same as before. But everything felt different. The space felt like sanctuary again instead of isolation. She stopped at her husband's desk and opened his notebook to the page with the red ink advice. "Remember, you built a good life. Don't let anyone convince you that you can't protect it." "I remembered," she said out loud. "And I protected us both." Justice didn't arrive like a miracle. It arrived like a door she'd finally learned to lock. And tonight, Marilyn Price slept in her own bed, in her own house, with her own money safely where it belonged. The system had finally said her truth out loud. And the sound was sweeter than any false flattery she'd ever received. Spring arrived early in Naperville. By March, Marilyn's maple tree was budding with tiny green leaves. She noticed them while drinking her morning coffee. The same coffee mug that said "World's Best Teacher." The same kitchen table where she'd spread evidence 6 months ago. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. Her pill organizer sat beside a small notebook labeled, "My Accounts, My Rules." Inside, she'd written account numbers in her own handwriting. Contact information for her attorney, her bank, her financial advisor. A record of her independence maintained and protected. The restitution money had arrived in February. $18,000 covering legal fees, bank charges, and emotional damages. More than she'd lost financially. Less than the dignity she'd reclaimed was worth. Marilyn had donated half the money to the Elder Abuse Prevention Program at the Senior Center. Money that would fund counseling for other victims, education for potential targets, resources that might prevent someone else's husband's life savings from being stolen by charming strangers. Her mornings had structure again. Coffee and pills at 7. Local news at 7:30. Then a walk around the neighborhood before the day grew warm. Exercise that made her feel strong instead of fragile. The walks often took her past Carol's condominium complex. Carol had moved away in January, sold her unit and disappeared without forwarding addresses. Running from the shame of public exposure more than legal consequences. Marilyn felt no satisfaction in Carol's exile. Only sadness that their friendship had been a performance from the beginning. That trust had been weaponized against her when she'd needed genuine connection. Tuesday mornings were reserved for volunteer work. Marilyn tutored middle school students at the library. Science help for kids struggling with chemistry and biology. Teaching again felt like returning to herself after months of being someone smaller. "Mrs. Price, I don't understand molarity," a 7th grader named Kevin had said during their last session. "Think of it like baking," Marilyn explained. "Concentration is how much chocolate you put in the cookie dough. Too little, and there's no taste. Too much, and it's overwhelming." Kevin's face lit up with understanding. The moment reminded Marilyn why she'd loved teaching. The joy of watching minds open to new possibilities. "You make science seem easy," Kevin said. "Science is just organized curiosity. You already have that. I'm just showing you how to use it." The library sessions had led to something unexpected. The coordinator, Margaret Walsh, had asked Marilyn to speak at schools about fraud prevention. Share her story with other seniors who might recognize warning signs in their own lives. "You survived something terrible," Margaret said. "But more than that, you fought back. People need to hear that fighting back is possible." The speaking engagements were scheduled twice a month. Senior centers, church groups, community organizations, audiences that listened with the intensity of people recognizing their own vulnerabilities. "Romance scammers study us," Marilyn would tell them. "They know we value politeness over self-protection. They use our good manners against us." After each presentation, someone would approach with their own story. A suspicious phone call, A too charming stranger. A friend who asked too many financial questions. Warning signs that made more sense after hearing Marilyn's experience. You saved me from making a terrible mistake, a woman in Aurora had said after Marilyn's presentation there. I was about to sign papers for a man I met online. Those conversations made the humiliation worthwhile. Transformed her embarrassment into education that protected others. Gave meaning to suffering that had once felt senseless. Thursday afternoons belonged to Tessa. Mother-daughter coffee dates that had evolved from obligatory check-ins to genuine friendship. Tessa treated her differently now. Like an adult who'd proven her competence under pressure. I'm proud of how you handled everything, Tessa had said during their last visit. I don't think I could have been that brave. You would have been. When survival is at stake, we discover strength we didn't know existed. Still, you didn't just protect yourself. You protected strangers too. The relationship shift felt profound. Tessa no longer managed Marilyn's social life or questioned her decisions. Instead, she asked for advice. Sought guidance about her own challenges. Treated her mother like the wise woman she'd always been. Weekends had become social again. Not the desperate socializing of someone fleeing loneliness, but the comfortable interaction of someone who enjoyed company without needing it for validation. Marilyn had joined a book club at the library. 8 women who met monthly to discuss novels and biographies. Conversations that ranged from literary analysis to personal philosophy. Friendships built on shared interests rather than mutual need. She'd also returned to church. Not the congregation where Carol had hunted for victims, but a smaller community across town. People who knew her story and respected her strength. A place where her experience was valued rather than pitied. God gave you wisdom to recognize evil, Pastor Thompson had said after her first visit. And courage to fight it. That's something to celebrate. The new church felt safer. Not because the people were necessarily better, but because Marilyn trusted her own judgment again. She could distinguish genuine kindness from calculated manipulation. Recognize the difference between care and control. Saturday evening found her cooking dinner for friends. Margaret from the library, Janet from the book club, Helen from her new church. Women who'd become important without drama or urgency. Relationships that felt solid because they'd been built slowly and honestly. This lasagna is incredible, Janet said as they finished eating. My husband's recipe. I'm finally using his cookbook again. That must bring back memories, Helen said gently. Good ones now. For a while, everything reminded me of loss. Now I can remember love without drowning in grief. The conversation turned to travel plans. Margaret was visiting grandchildren in Colorado. Janet had booked a cruise through the Mediterranean. Helen was considering a mission trip to Guatemala. What about you, Marilyn? Margaret asked. Any adventures planned? Marilyn smiled. I'm thinking about taking a writing class. Maybe turning my experience into something helpful for other people. You should. You have a gift for explaining complex things simply. Later, as her friends prepared to leave, Marilyn stood at her front door watching them walk to their cars. 3 women who'd entered her life without agenda. Who offered friendship without conditions. Who respected her boundaries while providing genuine support. The contrast with Daniel, Sharon, and Carol felt stark. Real friendship didn't require surrendering autonomy. Genuine care didn't demand financial access. True affection didn't come with legal documents attached. Alone in her kitchen, Marilyn cleaned dishes while reflecting on the evening. The laughter around her dinner table. The easy conversation among equals. The comfort of being known and accepted without performance. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Isolated, vulnerable, desperate enough for connection to ignore obvious warning signs. That woman had existed, had made understandable mistakes, had learned from them without being destroyed by them. Recovery wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who she'd always been underneath the fear and loneliness. A teacher, a protector, a woman capable of standing up for herself and others. The calendar on her refrigerator showed tomorrow's appointment. Lunch with Alicia to discuss her testimony in the trial of another romance scammer. Different defendants, but similar methods. Her experience would help convict criminals who preyed on vulnerable seniors. Your voice matters in these cases, Alicia had told her. Juries need to see that victims can be strong and intelligent and still be targeted. The work felt important. Justice served not as revenge, but as protection for future victims. Her pain transformed into purpose. Her humiliation reframed as education. Marilyn dried the last dish and put it away in the cabinet. Simple domestic tasks that had once felt lonely now felt peaceful. She wasn't hiding from the world anymore. She was choosing solitude when it served her and community when it nourished her. Before bed, she sat at her husband's desk and opened his notebook to the page with red ink advice. The words that had saved her when she'd needed saving most. Remember, you built a good life. Don't let anyone convince you that you can't protect it. Below his writing, she added her own message in blue ink. I remembered. I protected. I survived. I'm still building. She closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer. Not hidden away, but safely kept for the next time someone needed reminding of their own strength. Outside, spring rain tapped against the windows. New growth watering itself under cover of darkness. Tomorrow would bring fresh possibilities. New challenges. Opportunities to help others find their own voices. Marilyn turned off the lights and headed upstairs. In her bedroom mirror, she saw a woman who'd been tested and proven worthy of her own respect. Someone who'd learned that breaking didn't mean ending. That falling down wasn't the same as staying down. For the first time in years, she signed her own name on the journal beside her bed. Not as a victim recording trauma, but as a survivor documenting triumph. The signature looked strong, confident, like handwriting that belonged to someone who knew exactly who she was. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. The months of humiliation and fear had taught her something valuable. That dignity isn't given by others. It's claimed by ourselves. That strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the choice to protect what matters despite the risks. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. Every woman who'd attended her fraud prevention presentations. Every senior who'd recognized warning signs because of her testimony. Every victim who'd found the courage to fight back after hearing her example. They'd given purpose to her pain. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Because survival stories matter. Because speaking truth to predators protects others from their lies. Because the voices of women who've been underestimated can become the strongest advocates for those still fighting. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, you're stronger than anyone who tries to convince